Um, Today we are going to discuss about the second part of procurement process, right? Procurement, government, public procurement, and here, so this is the things we have to discuss throughout the syllabus. Yesterday we have discussed the introductory part of the procurement, the basic concept. So what is procurement? What are the entities? What kind of things can be purchased, procured by the government institutions? Right? So that sort of things, and what are the ethics? What are the frauds? What are the misprocurement? That sort of stuffs we have discussed. Now we move to the core area of the public procurement process. The public procurement process start from uh, procurement preparedness and planning, right? Procurement preparedness and planning. In simple terms, we can say as planning, procurement, planning, prepare and planning. Then once they prepared and uh, planned, then they move to this second phase, that is invitation, right? Invitation, receiving and closing and opening of bids, right? So based on the plan, uh, the procurement entity will advertise invitation for bid. Then the government institution, the procurement entity will receive invitations from the bidders, and receiving so the invitation is done by the procurement entity, and based on the invitation, um, the bidders will send bids to the organization, and organization will receive these bids and closing the deadline, no, the closing and opening of bids. We will discuss it later very clearly in a deep manner. And the bid evaluation, evaluate the bids, and contract award and debriefing, and then final step is uh, contract administration and closer out, the final stage. So the procurement process, right, it has certain steps, well defined certain steps to be followed by the government organization, right? Throughout this process, throughout this cycle, we have there's a thing we have to consider, that is regularity framework, right? Regularity framework. So who is monitoring? Are there any fraudulent activities are going on? Are there everything's are properly going on? If there are any misbehaviors and uh, inappropriate practices, if they are practiced on either government side, organization side, or the contractor side, bidder side. So there's a group of entities. There are some mechanisms which controls, they monitor the things. That is called what? Institution regulatory framework for public procurement, right? In we are going to discuss the how the procurement process is monitored and controlled by and the entity means by the government, right? So these are the syllabus, right? Now today's our the focus on here, institution and regulatory framework for public procurement. And here the institution and regulatory framework for public procurement, it's mean of this one, right? We are going to zoom in this thing. So this is what under this so we can divide this institution and regulatory framework for public procurement into two. So one is institutional framework, right? Institutional framework. And second one's regulatory framework. In the institutional framework, we have to discuss the institutions, three institutional arrangements. So that first one is procurement entities. Procurement entities mean the organization which initiate the procurement, right? So, for example, Southeastern University going to construct a building. They want to construct a building. So Southeastern University will consider as a procurement entity. If government school in your area is going to construct a class building or office building, so that is the time the procurement entity will be the school. And the procurement monitoring and regulating authorities, so which who are going to monitor and regulate, and who has the power to monitor and regulate this kind of procurement process. So there are organizations, for example, uh, National Procurement Commission, National Procurement Commission, National Procurement Agency, and the Treasury, right? And procurement committee, that sort of issues we will discuss here. And procurement committee. So for the in government organization, to take care of on the government procurement process, uh, the procurement committee will be established in procuring entities. And the second part, it is dealing with regulatory framework, and we can divide this framework regular. It means act, right? Act, and there are some circulars, right? So that kind of things we can divide into two: domestic and foreign. Domestic is within the country, within Sri Lanka. The foreign means if there are any contracts, it's beyond the scope of the local Sri Lanka. It's international one. And the domestic, the regulatory frameworks are statutes mean act, right? Statutes mean act governing procurement actions. And the second one is national procurement guidelines. There's a book, right? The book as guideline, national procurement guideline. All the procurements should follow up this national procurement guideline. The guidelines, manual, and regulations. So these two things coming under the domestic. In case of foreign uh, procurement provision in foreign financing agreement, say for example, the World Bank funded projects uh, and IMF funded projects. So that time they have to follow the international rules and regulations and procurement guidelines for international organizations. So the organizations, say for example, some of organizations are limit their business within the country. Some uh, construct contracting organizations, they are doing a multinational business, say China Construction Corporation is one of the example for foreign international organization. So the Port City Colombo, it's also constructed by a foreign contractor. Now we'll move the international institutional framework. Institution mean like organization, like organizational. Institutional mean organizational framework. Like organization, it's not exact meaning for institutional, but for your understanding purpose, we can fix it in your mind. Institutional framework mean organizational setup framework, and this might include the institutions that would primarily engage in planning, right? Include institutions, organizations that would primarily engage. They're engaging in planning, executing, monitoring, evaluating, and regulating the procurement actions of public sector organizations. So, the institutional framework under the here, so the institution, the organizations which are engaging, planning, executing, monitoring, evaluating, and regulating the procurement process of the government organization, right? And such institutions, such organizations in the context of Sri Lankan public service will include here procuring entity. Procuring entity means the organization which initiates or which doing the procurement. And procurement committee, the each committee there are 3 members at least, so we will discuss it in detail. And procurement monitoring and regulating authorities, and like national procurement agents, national procurement commission, like that. So unfortunately, now at present, both National Procurement Agency, National Procurement Commissions, not available at present. Right? Through the 20th Amendment, it has been abolished, especially National Procurement Commission. Right now, our focus hereafter in the forthcoming slides is about procuring entities. Procuring entities. Procuring entity, right? In simple terms, a government organizations which start or initiate the procurement, the needy organization. Say, for example, a school is going to construct a building. That time, the school is a procuring entity. The procuring entity means a government ministry or provincial council or government department, statutory authority, or government corporation or government owned company like SLT, local authority, Pradesh Sabha, like that, or any subdivision thereof, any subdivision of this kind of government organization thereof, or any other body fully or partly owned by the government of Sri Lanka, right? Or where the government of Sri Lanka has effective control of such body that engage in procurement, right? The procure entity simply means the government organizations which are which is engaging in the procurement, which is engaging in the procurement in simple terms. The responsibilities of procuring entity. What are the responsibilities of them? Right, for our university is going to construct a new hostel complex. They plan. So this time the university, Southeastern University of Sri Lanka, is considered as a procuring entity. So what are the responsibilities of that procuring entity? Here, procuring entity is engaged in and responsible for, first, number one, completing all procurement preparedness activities, right? So if our university wants hostel complex, so the university should complete all the procurement preparedness. They prepare themselves. The organization should prepare for procurement and getting legitimate appointment required to procurement committees. Getting legitimately appointed required committee. So the university is requesting for the appointment of procurement committees in future, right? In forthcoming slides we will discuss about procurement in committees. So the procurement entity should responsible for getting legitimately appointed procurement committees. Very powerful committee, right? In procurement committee. The procurement preparedness and planning, both preparedness and planning. Preparedness and planning through the preparation of, for example, advanced procurement actions, right? And master procurement plan. These are the documents. And procurement time schedule, procurement time schedule, on which date we are going to invite for bids, when they are going to advertise, when we are going to issue the bid documents, when they are going to close the bid, when we are going to open the bid, and when they are going to award the construction contract, and where they are going to start construction, when they have to finish it. So this kind of stuffs will include in the procurement time schedule. And procurement implementation plan, and the total cost estimates, standard building documents, etc. So all the things should be done by the procuring entity. The procuring entity is responsible for preparedness and planning. Under this, the procuring entity should prepare this kind of documents. Then executing the other stages of procurement process in coordination with procurement committees, right? Then procuring committee will request for the establishment of procurement committee from the higher authorities, and they have to take follow-up actions. All coordinations will be done by the procuring entity. There are commissions, there are committees, there are technical evaluation committees, right? There are many members, and they have to, the procuring entity is responsible to coordinate such committees, and they have to schedule the meetings. So executing other stage of procurement process in coordination with procurement committees. Adhere to implement, adhere and implement the regulatory requirement and recommendation posted by regulatory and law enforcement authorities. So no, I already told you know that there were two agencies, two organizations, especially National Procurement Agency and National Procurement Commission. The procuring entity should ensure that the guidelines issued by those commission and agents are followed by followed throughout the uh, people or entities throughout the procurement procedure, right? They have to uh, keep an eye with them. And also the responsibilities of procurement entity continues. The officer in charge of a procurement action, right? The officer in charge of a procurement action, such as head of the department, head of the department. Most of the time, head of the department is responsible or is in charge for the procurement, right? And head of the procurement, head of the department, and project directors. There are some projects. Say, for example, uh, say Mahavali Development Project. So huge project in Sri Lanka, and now the highway project, expressway project, right? It's coming under the ministry, not the departments, right? It's come under the ministry without department, and the ministry will establish a project for under the each project. They appoint a project director, right? And so head of the department, in case of project director, together with assistance of the procurement specialist. There are specialists, procurement specialists, consultants, and other staff shall be responsible for the following, right? And head of the department. Head of the department is the officer in charge, simply officer in charge. Officer in charge may be head of the department or project director, right? Those two are the people who are in charge, officer in charge for the procurement. And they have to work together with the assistance of procurement specialists, consultants, and other staffs. So they are responsible for one, maintenance of necessary communications with all stakeholders of the procurement process. So those two people, the head of the department and project director, simply we call them as officer in charge. The officer in charge is responsible for maintaining the necessary communication with all stakeholders of the procurement process. So stakeholders may include the procurement committee, technical evaluation committee, bidders, contractors, and officers from national procurement committee, like that. They have to communicate. So preparation of invitation for pre-qualification and its submission to the technical evaluation committee for review and approval. So before inviting for bids, the procuring entity is responsible for preparing of the documents and the need specifications. So with the assistance of technical evaluation committee, they have to confirm, and they are subject to review and approval of the tech committee. So all the things and the preparation of all such documents is responsible of the officer in charge. The preparation of the draft bidding document, including specification and the submission of the same to the technical evaluation committee for review and approval. Even the bid document also should be prepared by procuring entity. Once they are preparing the draft bidding document, they will forward the document to tech committee. The committee will review the document, whether the document is it up to the standard or not. If there are any things to be amended, they will inform to the procuring entity. Then they will uh, finalize and again send them to technical evaluation committee for the approval. And then preparation of data and information prior to the evaluation report. The procuring entity, it means officer in charge, should uh, be ready with the data and information prior to the evaluation report. Right after the meeting, the technical evaluation committee and procurement committee will evaluate the reports, the bits. That time, the procuring entity is prepared for all information and data at that time. And issuance of invitation and facilitating the meeting of tech and procurement committees. So all the arrangements for the technical evaluation committee meeting and procurement committee meeting done by the procuring entity. And the circulation of the minutes of the meetings of technical evaluation committee and procurement committee. So every meeting they will prepare, they will, and so it's a responsibility to prepare the minutes. That minutes should be circulated among the members of tech committee and procurement committee. And provision of any request assistance to tech and tech committee and procurement committee on any request made by them, right? Some throughout the procurement process, tech committee and procurement committee will time to time they require documents, assistance, help from for them to facilitate the procurement process and all other matters incidental tier 2, right? Time to time they need some documents, some information, some data. So at that time the procuring entity, especially officer in charge, will give that to them. Right. Now we have moved to the second part of institutional framework, that is procurement monitoring and regulating authorities. Right. Here we will discuss here the National Procurement Agency. National Procurement Agency (NPA) was not present. Right. It's a past tense. No more there. Right. National Procurement Agency was the principal authority for public procurements in Sri Lanka by formulating, amending, interpreting procurement regulations. Right? In Sri Lanka, National Procurement Agency was responsible for formulating, right, developing, amending. If they time to time they want amendments and interpreting. So if other stakeholders getting any doubtful things, they should explain that thing with regard to the procurement, right? So it's the responsibility of the National Procurement Agency. So National Procurement Agency issues guidelines and manuals, standard between documents, evaluation methodologies, standard contract and specifications, right? I will upload in your VLE. So these guidelines, National Procurement Guidelines Manual, standard between document, right? You can find in the website, right? And from 2007, the operation of National Procurement Agency has been brought under the Treasury, right? Now it was under the control of Treasury and executed through the Department of Public Finance of the Ministry of Finance and Planning, right? It's coming under the Finance Ministry, right? Under the Finance Ministry, the Department of Public Finance will handle the things. National Procurement Agency, the responsibilities of the National Procurement Agency now is under the control of Department of Public Finance under the Ministry of Finance. According to the procurement manual, the responsibility of the procurement activities shall be vested with the secretaries to the respective line ministry, right? According to the manual issued by the National Procurement Agency, all the responsibilities regarding the procurement finally will be ended up with secretaries of the respective line ministries. So we already discussed about this. The, the secretaries of each minister, the secretary to the minister is considered as a chief accounting officer, right? Therefore, he is the responsible person on all the procurement process, right? Who are deemed to be the chief accounting officer of such ministries. And the procurement monitoring and regulating authorities. A typical procurement authority are engaged in the following activities: formulation of procurement policy and regulation, formulation of procurement policy and regulations, and procurement prior reviews, right? And no objections, they have power, right? And the procurement oversight and post reviews. So this one, the procurement prior reviews, right? It's pre-review of the procurement before start the procurement process. They can get the reviews done, do the reviews, and then throughout the process of procurement they can monitor, and after the procurement process also they can monitor. So what was happened in the procurement process, and procurement audit, if there are any complaint they are receiving on procurement process, so they have the power to audit the procurement process of such organization. And procurement complaint review, right? If anybody have make a petition, so the authorities have the power to review the complaint. And the procurement monitoring and regulating agencies, here the National Procurement Agency as the procurement monitoring and regulating authority in Sri Lanka shall monitor the performance of procurement committees and the technical evaluation committee. They can monitor the performance of both procurement committee as well as technical evaluation committee, and conduct random post procurement reviews. So randomly they can check the procurement process, and the National Procurement Agency can examine on random basis the regularity of attendance at meetings, and whether the decisions taken by the members are in accordance with accepted procurement procedures and their guidelines. No? The time to time, the procurement committee and tech committee will hold a meeting, meeting, and also they will take some decisions, and the national procurement agency will check whether their decisions are in line with their guidelines or not, right? If it is established that members were negligence, they are not uh, take serious careness on their procurement process, or inactive, right? Dummy people, no, dummy, inactive, or irresponsible. So we have yesterday discussed these things are coming under the fraud, right? Fraud in the procurement process. uh, in conduct and performance of duties at the procurement committees and technical evaluation committees, resulting in procurement delay, right? The negligence, the fraudulent behaviors of the member of procurement committee and technical evaluation committee or the procurement entities, it finally is resulting with a procurement delay. It may cause the delay in procurement. The national procurement or agency may at this sole discretion, so they have power to get decision. So that time, advise the member to expedite the procurement process. They can advise them to speedize the procurement process by rescheduling the procurement time schedule. They can advise for that, and advise the members to adopt corrective measures. So the national procurement agents can advise them to adapt corrective measures. If there are any deviations, they can advise them to make corrective actions, and replace such irresponsible members if there are any persons in that committee, the agency has authority to replace that person, irresponsible member, and they can cancel the names of such members from the panel. Even they can cancel the names of such members who are negligent, inactive, or irresponsible, right? And the third thing is procurement committees. It's coming under the institutional framework. So procurement committees here, there are 6 levels of procurement committees. The procurement committees is the committee, right? You have to have a very clear understanding of what is procurement committee. Procurement committees mean very simply, for your understanding, I can tell you like that. So a group of members, this number of members will not less than 3, right? The panel, the group of members which having at least 3 members, which is responsible for the entire procurement process in an organization, right? So it's a procurement committee. A procurement committee is a committee which is individually and jointly responsible. Individually means each members in the committee is responsible. Jointly means these 3 people get together, jointly responsible to manage the entire process of procurement in coordination with procuring entity. The procurement entity should work with procuring entity. The procuring entity will coordinate the procurement committee meetings. The following are the types of procurement committees in Sri Lankan public sector organization. There are 6. The supreme body, right? Supreme body is the cabinet appointed procurement committees. Cabinet appointed procurement committees. The large project, say the highway project, no, expressway projects, construction of airport projects, huge projects. I think 250 million or so, right? Uh, Before 250 million, they have to appoint cabinet appointed procurement committee, and another committee called the standing cabinet appointed procurement committee. And in addition to the cabinet appointed procurement committee, so they are appointing standing, right? Standing cabinet appointed procurement committee. This committee will be appointed in case of emergency, right? And abnormal situations. This one. And then ministry procurement committee, it is in ministry level, ministry procurement committee, and then department procurement committee at department level, and project procurement committee at project level, regional procurement committee, it is on the organizational level.